No Omega had ever set foot in the arena. That was the first unwritten law of Valdros. Omegas served. They obeyed. They did not challenge. So when the girl walked through the iron gates, barefoot and bleeding and carrying a child on her back, the crowd forgot how to breathe. She was small, thin from hunger, trembling from cold, her dress torn and caked with mud from the roads. Nobody like her belonged here, in the heart of the obsidian fortress called Darkholm, where alphas tested their strength and warriors earned their rank through combat. The guards moved to intercept her. The wolves flanking the throne rose, hackles lifting. Every noble in attendance pressed themselves deeper into their seats because they knew what would happen now. The girl would be dragged out, perhaps whipped, perhaps worse. Omegas who forgot their place did not survive long under the reign of Alpha King Torvald. He was called the Fang of the North, the man who had unified 5 warring territories through blood and conquest. A name mothers whispered to frighten children into obedience, a name soldiers invoked before battle like a prayer. He sat on the throne carved from black stone, watching the girl approach with eyes the color of winter ice, pale gray and utterly unreadable. The child on her back stirred. The girl set her down gently, then straightened her spine and looked directly at the king. "I challenge you," she said. The arena went silent. Then someone laughed, sharp and disbelieving. The laughter spread, nervous and cruel. But the king did not laugh. He rose slowly, descended the steps, and walked toward her. The crowd held its breath. Everyone expected him to kill her. Instead, he knelt. 12 hours earlier, Saren's hands had been steady. Now, standing in the heart of Darkholm with every eye in the kingdom fixed on her, she could not stop them from shaking. She had known this was madness. She had known it when she had lifted Ren onto her back and started walking before dawn. She had known it when the gates of the capital loomed before her, black iron twisted into the shape of snarling wolves. She had known it when the guards had laughed and let her pass because an Omega with a child posed no threat to anyone. But knowing something was madness and stopping yourself from doing it were 2 different things. Ren needed medicine. Ren needed warmth and food and safety. Ren needed things Saren could not provide, not anymore. Not since the sickness had taken their village healer 2 weeks ago, and the winter had sealed the mountain passes, and the traders had stopped coming. Saren had tried everything else first. She had begged the village elder. She had walked 3 days to the nearest town and pleaded with every healer she could find. She had sold her mother's ring, her father's tools, everything she owned except the clothes on her back and the child she carried. Nothing had worked. No one would help an Omega with no coin and no status and no claim to anything. So Saren had done the only thing left. She had walked to Darkholm. She had walked into the arena during the monthly assembly, when any citizen of Valdros could petition the king, any citizen except Omegas. The law did not forbid it explicitly, but tradition was stronger than law here. Omegas did not speak in the arena. Omegas did not look the king in the eye. Omegas certainly did not issue challenges. Saren had done all 3. And now the king was kneeling in front of her, and she had no idea what happened next. "You're bleeding," he said. His voice was lower than she had expected. Rough, like stone grinding against stone, but not angry. Not yet. Saren looked down at her feet. She had lost her shoes 2 days ago, somewhere on the frozen road between the mountain pass and the capital. The cuts had stopped hurting yesterday, which probably meant something bad, but she had not had time to think about it. "It doesn't matter," she said. "It does if you collapse before you explain yourself." He rose, and Saren had to tilt her head back to see his face. He was enormous. Tall and broad, with dark hair pulled back from a face that looked like it had been carved from the same black stone as his throne. Scars marked his jaw, and his temple. His eyes gave nothing away. "Why are you here, Omega?" he asked. "My name is Saren." The crowd inhaled sharply. "You did not correct the king. You especially did not correct the king when you were an Omega who had just broken every rule of decorum the kingdom possessed." But the king only tilted his head, curiosity sparking in those winter eyes. "Why are you here, Saren?" She reached behind her and pulled Ren forward. The child was barely conscious, her small body burning with fever, her breath rattling in her chest. "My sister," Saren said. "She's dying. Your healers could save her. I'll do anything." The king looked at the child. His expression did not change, but his posture shifted, a tension that had not been there before. "Anything," he repeated. "Yes. You understand what you've done." It was not a question. "An Omega cannot issue a challenge. The penalty is death." "I understand." "And you did it anyway." Saren met his eyes. "She's my sister." Silence. The crowd watched, barely breathing. Then the king turned to his guards. "Summon the royal physician. Prepare quarters in the east wing." He looked at Saren, and his voice dropped so only she could hear. "You're either the bravest person I've ever met, or the most foolish." "I don't care which," Saren said, "as long as she lives." The king's jaw tightened. He studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "Bring them inside," he said finally. "Both of them." Behind her, someone in the crowd whispered, "Has he lost his mind?" Saren didn't know. But when the guards moved forward and lifted Ren gently from her arms, when warmth finally seeped back into her frozen bones, she decided she didn't care. Whatever came next, she would face it. The Omega was a problem. Torvald had known it the moment she walked through the arena gates. He had seen the way the crowd looked at her, half contempt and half fear. He had seen the way his guards had tensed, waiting for his signal, ready to remove her by force. He should have given that signal. Every law and tradition of Valdros demanded it. An Omega in the arena was an insult to the throne itself. An Omega issuing a challenge was unthinkable. And yet, those eyes, mismatched. One the color of honey and one the color of deep earth. Defiant and terrified and utterly unwilling to look away. She had walked 3 days through snow and ice with a dying child on her back. She had entered a fortress full of people who would happily watch her executed. She had looked the most feared alpha in the north in the eye and said, "I challenge you." She was either extraordinary or insane, possibly both. "You're being sentimental." Torvald turned from the window. His mother, Lady Morvena, stood in the doorway, her silver hair immaculately styled, her expression carved from ice. "I'm being practical," he said. "Practical." She laughed, a sound like shattering glass. "You've invited an Omega into the royal wing. You've summoned your personal physician for a peasant child. The court is already whispering that you've gone soft. Let them whisper. Whispers become rumors. Rumors become doubt. Doubt becomes rebellion." She stepped closer, her voice dropping. "You fought for 3 years to unify this kingdom. You cannot let one foolish girl unravel everything you've built." Torvald said nothing. He watched the snow falling outside, covering the courtyard in white. His mother had been saying things like this for as long as he could remember. Power required hardness. Mercy was weakness. A king who bent would eventually break. He had believed her once. He had built his entire reign on that belief. The wars, the conquests, the ruthless efficiency that had earned him his reputation. But lately, a heaviness had settled in his chest when he looked at the kingdom he had built. The fear in his subjects' eyes. The way children ran when they saw his shadow. He had unified Valdros, but at what cost? "The child is innocent," he said finally. "Innocence is irrelevant. The Omega broke the law. If you don't punish her, others will think they can do the same." "Perhaps they should." His mother went still. What did you say? Torvald turned to face her. Perhaps Omegas should be able to petition the throne. Perhaps the arena should be open to everyone, not just alphas with rank and status. You can't be serious. I've never been more serious. Lady Morvena's eyes flickered, darkness moving through them. Then she smiled, cool and controlled. You're tired. The assembly was long. We'll discuss this tomorrow. She turned and left before he could respond. Torvald watched her go, unease stirring in his chest. His mother had always been ambitious. She had raised him to be a weapon, had shaped every aspect of his training and education. She had never let him forget that he was king because of her. But lately he had begun to wonder if that was entirely true. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. His personal guard, a scarred warrior named Corvath, stepped inside. The physician has finished examining the child, Your Majesty. And? She'll live. The fever was severe, but they've stabilized her. Another day without treatment and she would have died. Torvald nodded, tension loosening in his chest that he hadn't realized was there. And the Omega? Saren. Corvath said the name carefully, watching the king's face. She refused to leave her sister's side. The healers had to treat her feet while she sat beside the bed. Frostbite, deep cuts. She should have collapsed long before she reached the arena. But she didn't. No, Your Majesty, she didn't. Torvald was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Post guards outside their quarters. No one enters without my permission." Corvath hesitated. "Your mother requested access to the Omega for questioning." "No one," Torvald repeated, "enters without my permission." Corvath bowed and left. Torvald turned back to the window. The snow was falling harder now, covering the courtyard in white, erasing the footprints of everyone who had walked through the arena that day. He thought about mismatched eyes and a voice that did not waver. "She's my sister." 3 words. Simple. Devastating. When was the last time anyone had loved something that fiercely? When was the last time he had? The question sat heavy in his chest, and he had no answer. Ren woke on the second morning. Saren was sitting beside her bed, where she had been sitting for almost 30 hours straight, when those small eyes finally fluttered open. Saren. Ren's voice was thin and scratchy, but it was the most beautiful sound Saren had ever heard. "Where are we?" "Somewhere safe." Saren brushed the hair from her sister's face, tears burning in her eyes. "You're going to be okay. The healers fixed you." Ren looked around the room with wide eyes. It was larger than their entire cottage back home, with heavy curtains blocking out the cold and a fire crackling in a stone hearth. Tapestries covered the walls. The bed was softer than anything either of them had ever touched. "This is a palace," Ren whispered. "Yes." "Are we in trouble?" Saren hesitated. She didn't know how to answer that. She didn't know what she was anymore, prisoner or guest, condemned or pardoned. The king had given no indication of what would happen next. He had simply ordered them brought here, and then vanished. "No," she said finally. "We're not in trouble." A knock at the door made them both jump. Saren rose, positioning herself between Ren and whoever was coming. But it was only a servant, a young beta woman with kind eyes and a tray of food. "The king requests your presence in the Great Hall," she said. "When you're ready." Saren's stomach tightened. "Both of us?" "Just you, miss. Your sister should rest." Ren's hand caught Saren's sleeve. "Don't go." "I have to." Saren knelt beside the bed. "Listen to me. Whatever happens, you stay here. You eat everything on that tray. You get strong, understand? But what if they hurt you? They won't." Saren kissed her forehead. "I'll come back. I promise." The walk to the Great Hall felt endless. Guards flanked her, silent and imposing. The corridors were carved from black stone, lined with torches that cast flickering shadows. Everything about this place was designed to intimidate. Saren refused to be intimidated. The doors to the great hall swung open, and she stepped inside. The king sat on his throne, watching her approach. He was dressed simply today. No armor, no crown. But the power radiating off him was unmistakable. The room was full of nobles, all of them staring at her with expressions ranging from curiosity to outright hostility. Saren walked to the center of the hall and stopped. "Saren of the mountain villages," the king said. "You broke the law. You entered the arena without right. You issued a challenge you could not possibly win." He paused. "Do you have anything to say for yourself?" The hall fell silent. Every eye fixed on her. Saren thought about Ren, safe and warm in the room upstairs. She thought about the 3-day walk through the snow, the desperation that had driven her here. She thought about her parents, dead 2 years now, and the promise she had made to protect her sister no matter what. "I would do it again," she said. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Someone laughed. The king did not laugh. He leaned forward, his gaze pinning her in place. "You would? If it meant saving her life, I would walk through fire. I would face any challenge. I would kneel before every alpha in this kingdom and beg if I had to." She lifted her chin. "I'm not sorry for what I did. I'm only sorry it was necessary." The silence stretched. Then slowly, the king rose. He descended the steps and stopped directly in front of her, close enough that she could see the scars on his face in sharp detail. "You shame us," he said quietly. Saren blinked. "What?" "Every noble in this room has power and wealth and status. Not one of them would do what you did for someone they loved." His voice carried through the hall, clear and deliberate. "An Omega with nothing walked into my arena and showed more courage than any alpha here. That is not something to punish. That is something to reward." The crowd erupted. Voices rose in protest, outrage, and disbelief. The king silenced them with a single raised hand. "The law states that any citizen may petition the throne," he continued. "From this day forward, Omegas are citizens. Full citizens, with all the rights that entails." Saren stared at him. Her pulse roared in her ears. "You," the king said, looking at her with an expression she could not read, "will remain in Darkholm as my guest. Your sister will receive the best care my healers can provide. In return, I ask only one thing." "What?" "Advise me." His voice dropped. "You see things clearly. You say what you mean. Everyone else in this court tells me what they think I want to hear. I need someone who won't." Saren opened her mouth to respond, but before she could speak, a voice cut through the hall like a blade. "This is outrageous." Lady Morvena stepped forward, her silver hair gleaming and her eyes hard as flint. "You would elevate an Omega above your own court? You would make this," she gestured at Saren dismissively, "an advisor to the throne?" The king's expression did not change. "Yes." "Then you leave me no choice." Lady Morvena smiled, cold and sharp. "I invoke the right of challenge. The Omega must prove her worth in the arena by combat or forfeit her life." Ice slid down Saren's spine. Across the hall, the king's eyes went dark. "The right of challenge is law," Torvald said, his voice cutting through the murmurs. "But so is the right of substitution. Any challenged party may name a champion to fight in their stead." He descended the final step and stopped beside Saren. "I will be her champion." Gasps echoed through the hall. "You cannot," Lady Morvena said, her composure cracking. "You're the king. You cannot fight on behalf of my advisor, a position that exists by my authority." Torvald's voice hardened. "I can do whatever I wish, Mother. That is what it means to be king." Their eyes locked. The hall held its breath. Lady Morvena's jaw tightened. She looked at the assembled nobles, at Corvath standing with his hand on his sword, at her son's immovable expression. Then she smiled, thin, controlled. I withdraw the challenge, she said. For now. She turned and swept out of the hall before anyone could respond. Saren exhaled. Her legs felt weak. Torvald glanced at her, his expression unreadable. Breathe, he said quietly. The hard part is over. But watching Lady Morvena's retreating back, seeing the rigid set of her shoulders, Saren knew that wasn't true. The hard part was just beginning. The Omega was changing things. 3 weeks had passed since the confrontation in the Great Hall. 3 weeks since his mother had retreated to her wing of the castle, silent and watchful. 3 weeks since Torvald had begun to see his kingdom through different eyes. Saren attended every council meeting. She asked questions that made the nobles uncomfortable. She pointed out flaws in proposals that everyone else had been too afraid to mention. She looked at problems sideways and found solutions that had never occurred to anyone. She was infuriating. She was invaluable. She was also becoming increasingly difficult to stop thinking about. Torvald stood on the balcony outside his chambers, watching her cross the courtyard below. Ren walked beside her, chattering animatedly, occasionally tugging at Saren's hand to point at something. Saren smiled, bent to listen, responded with obvious patience. You're staring again. Corvath appeared beside him, arms crossed. I'm observing, Torvald said. That's not what it looks like. Torvald ignored him. Below, Ren spotted something in the garden and took off running. Saren followed, her laughter floating up through the cold air. She's good for this place, Corvath said quietly. Both of them. I know. Your mother doesn't agree. Torvald's jaw tightened. My mother rarely agrees with anything that wasn't her idea. She's been meeting with Lord Heron's faction, quietly, the nobles who opposed your decree about Omegas. Let her meet with whoever she wants. Torvald. Corvath rarely used his name. It made Torvald turn. She's planning something. I don't know what yet, but she's not the type to accept defeat gracefully. She didn't defeat. She withdrew. Same thing, to her. Corvath's eyes were serious. Watch your back, and watch the Omegas. He left before Torvald could respond. That evening, Torvald found himself walking toward Saren's chambers. He told himself it was to discuss tomorrow's council agenda. He told himself it was purely professional. He knocked. Saren opened the door, surprise flickering across her face. Your Majesty. Torvald, he corrected. When we're alone. She hesitated, then stepped back to let him in. The room was warm, fire crackling in the hearth. Ren was asleep in the bed, curled beneath heavy blankets, her breathing slow and peaceful. She's dreaming about something good, Saren said softly, following his gaze. She smiles like that when the dreams are good. You know her dreams? I know her. Saren moved to the window seat and sat. After a moment, Torvald joined her. We've been together since our parents died. 2 years now. I've learned every expression, every sound, and every mood. That's a heavy burden for someone so young. She's not a burden. The words came quick, defensive. Then she softened. She's the reason I kept going. When everything fell apart, she was the one thing that made sense. Torvald was quiet for a moment. The firelight played across Saren's face, catching the gold in her mismatched eyes. I had a brother once, he said, younger than me, small, constantly sick. Saren turned to look at him. He was an Omega, rare in royal bloodlines, but it happens. My mother considered it a disgrace. She wanted him sent away. What did you do? I refused. I told her I would protect him no matter what. He paused. He died when he was 7. A fever, they said. I'm sorry. It was a long time ago. But his voice betrayed him. I've been thinking about him lately, wondering if I could have done more. Saren reached out and placed her hand on his arm. The touch was light, tentative. He looked at her hand, then at her face. You did what you could, she said. That's all anyone can do. How do you know? Because you're here. Her voice was soft. Because you stopped for me in the arena. Because you're fighting for things your kingdom told you didn't matter. She squeezed gently. That's not the behavior of someone who gives up on the people he loves. The air between them thickened. Torvald became aware of how close they were sitting. The warmth radiating from her body. The way her lips parted slightly as she breathed. Saren, he said, his voice rough. Yes? He reached up and touched her face, brushed a strand of hair back from her cheek. Her breath caught. I don't know what I'm doing, he admitted. Neither do I. They stayed like that for a long moment, eyes locked, hearts pounding. Then Ren stirred in her sleep, and the moment shattered. Saren pulled back, heat flooding her face. She might wake. Of course. Torvald rose. Tomorrow. Council meeting. We'll talk then. He was halfway to the door when her voice stopped him. Torvald? He turned. Thank you, she said, for telling me about your brother. He nodded once. Then he left, closing the door softly behind him. He didn't see his mother watching from the shadows at the end of the corridor, her expression calculating and cold. Another 3 weeks passed, bringing Saren's time at Darkholm to nearly 2 months. She had learned the rhythms of the fortress the way she had once learned the rhythms of her village. The morning bells that signaled breakfast, the afternoon councils where she sat beside the king and offered her perspective. The evening meals where Ren chattered endlessly about her day, while the king listened with surprising patience. Ren had more than recovered. She had bloomed. The healers said it was remarkable. The fever had damaged her lungs, they had warned. She might always be fragile. Instead, she grew stronger every day, running through the corridors with an energy that exhausted the servants assigned to watch her. She had also, inexplicably, decided that the Alpha King was her favorite person in the world. He's teaching me to track, Ren announced one afternoon, bursting into Serene's chambers with muddy boots and leaves in her hair. He says I have good instincts. Does he? He also says I talk too much, but he smiles when he says it, so I don't think he means it. She bounced onto the bed. Can I watch the training yard tomorrow? Corvath said there's going to be a demonstration. If you stay out of the way. I always stay out of the way. Saren raised an eyebrow. Mostly, Ren amended. I mostly stay out of the way. The next morning, Saren found herself in the courtyard watching Torvald train new recruits. She told herself she was there to supervise Ren. She told herself it had nothing to do with the way he moved, fluid and powerful, his body a weapon honed by years of combat. She was lying to herself, and she knew it. Ren sat on a stone bench nearby, utterly captivated. When one of the recruits landed a lucky blow and Torvald staggered back, she gasped. When he recovered and swept the recruit's legs out in one smooth motion, she cheered. Torvald glanced up at the sound. His eyes found Saren's across the courtyard. Warmth uncurled in her chest. Dangerous warmth. He handed his training sword to Corvath and walked toward them, wiping sweat from his brow. You're getting better, Ren said seriously. That one almost got you. Almost, Torvald agreed. That's the idea. I want them to believe they can win. But they can't, right? A smile tugged at his mouth. Not yet. Ren beamed. Then she spotted something across the courtyard and took off running before Saren could stop her. She's fast, Torvald observed. Too fast. Saren watched her sister disappear around a corner. She'll either become a great warrior or give me gray hair. Possibly both. She reminds me of someone. Who? He looked at her. You. Heat crept up Saren's neck. I'm not brave? Reckless? Willing to charge into impossible situations for the people she loves? His voice softened. You're exactly like that. She didn't know what to say, so she said nothing. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the recruits resume their training. After a moment, Torvald spoke again. The council meets tomorrow to discuss the spring planting allocations. Lord Heron will argue for reducing resources to the border villages again. He always does. He's wrong. I know. She glanced at him. But you can't just override him. You need the other lords to see why he's wrong. That's why I have you. He turned to face her fully. I've been thinking about a proposal. Open the arena once a month to common petitions. Anyone can come, regardless of rank or status. Hear grievances directly instead of filtering them through nobles who have their own interests. Saren stared at him. That would change everything. That's the point. The nobles will fight it. Let them. His jaw set with determination. This kingdom was built on strength, but strength without wisdom is just violence. I'm tired of being violent. A wall cracked open in Saren's chest. This man, this king who had conquered nations and inspired terror, standing in the morning light talking about wisdom and change. You're not what I expected, she said quietly. Neither are you. His eyes held hers. I'm beginning to think that's a good thing. The moment stretched between them, fragile and electric. Then Ren came running back, dragging a reluctant Corvath behind her, and the world rushed back in. But the ground beneath them had shifted, and there was no going back. Across the courtyard, Lady Morvena watched from a high window, her expression unreadable. The incident happened 3 nights later. Saren was in Ren's room, reading her a story before bed, when the screaming started. Not human screaming. Something deeper, something primal and terrible that made the walls themselves seem to tremble. Ren sat bolt upright. What's that? Stay here. Saren was already moving. Lock the door behind me. Don't open it for anyone except me or Corvath. But, promise me. Ren's eyes were huge with fear. I promise. Saren ran. The sound was coming from the king's private chambers. Guards crowded the corridor outside, but none of them were entering. They stood pressed against the walls, faces pale with terror. What's happening? Saren demanded. Corvath appeared, blood on his temple. He's shifting. We can't stop it. What do you mean you can't stop it? It's not normal. Corvath's voice shook. He was fine at dinner. Then he just collapsed. Started seizing. The transformation took him before we could do anything. Another roar shook the corridor. Something crashed inside the room. Everyone out, Corvath ordered. Now, before he... The doors burst open. The wolf was enormous. Black as midnight, shoulders as high as Saren's chest, eyes wild and unfocused. It paced in jerky, wrong movements, claws gouging the stone floor, breath coming in harsh snarls. This was not the controlled power she had seen in the arena. This was chaos given form. Violence without direction. The guards drew weapons. Corvath stepped forward. No. Saren grabbed his arm. You'll only make it worse. We have to contain him. He's not a threat. He's lost. She didn't know how she knew, but she did. The confusion in those wild eyes told her everything. He doesn't know where he is. The wolf's head swung toward her. A growl rumbled from its chest. Corvath tried to pull her back. Get behind me. But Saren was already walking forward. Your Majesty, she said softly. Torvald. The growl deepened. You're safe. You're in Darkholm. In your home. She kept her voice even, her movements slow. Whatever's happening, it's going to pass. You just have to breathe. The wolf's muscles tensed, ready to spring. Saren stopped, 3 feet away, close enough to touch. You told me you failed your brother, she said quietly, that you've been failing ever since. But you haven't failed Ren. You haven't failed me. The wild eyes flickered. You're not a monster. You're a man who's been carrying something too heavy for too long. She extended her hand slowly, palm up. Let me help you carry it. Silence. Then the wolf's great body shuddered. The tension drained from its muscles. It lowered itself to the ground with a heavy exhale, massive head coming to rest near her feet. Saren breathed. Behind her, the guards gaped. She knelt beside him, placed her hand on his muzzle, and waited. 20 minutes later, the transformation reversed. Torvald lay on the cold stone floor, human again, barely conscious. Saren had already sent the servants for blankets and water. Corvath had cleared the corridor. "How did you know?" Corvath asked, staring at her. "I didn't." Saren covered Torvald with a heavy cloak. "I just knew he needed someone to stay." She sat beside him for hours, watching his breathing slowly even out. His face was pale, drawn with exhaustion. Whatever had happened, it had taken everything from him. When she was certain he was sleeping peacefully, she rose and walked to the table where his evening meal still sat, half finished. She lifted the wine goblet, breathed in. Underneath the rich scent of red wine, something sharper, something that didn't belong. Dread pooled in her chest. She set the goblet down carefully, wrapped it in cloth, hid it in her cloak. Then she went to find the one person in this castle she trusted. Corvath was waiting in the corridor. "Something's wrong," she said quietly. "I need the castle alchemist. Tonight. Tell no one." His eyes searched her face. Whatever he saw there made him nod. "Follow me." As they walked through the darkened corridors, Saren thought about Lady Morvena's smile during the withdrawn challenge, the way she had said, "for now." She had thought it was an empty threat. Now she was beginning to realize it was a promise. The alchemist's name was Heidrek. He was old and bent, with hands that shook slightly and eyes that missed nothing. He had served the royal family for 40 years. He had no loyalty to anyone except the truth. That was why Saren had chosen him. "You're certain about this?" he asked, examining the cloth-wrapped goblet under lamplight. His workshop was hidden in the lower levels of the castle, cramped and cluttered and smelling of strange chemicals. "I'm certain something is wrong," Saren said. "I need to know what." Heidrek worked in silence. He extracted samples, mixed compounds, held glass vials up to the flame. Saren watched without understanding, her heart hammering against her ribs. An hour passed. Then 2. Finally, Heidrek set down his instruments and turned to face her. "Moonshade," he said quietly. "Mixed with valerian root and something else I can't identify. The combination would be undetectable to anyone who didn't know what to look for." "What does it do?" "In small doses? Heightened aggression, loss of control, violent mood swings." He paused. "In wolves, it destabilizes the shift, makes the transformation painful, unpredictable. The victim would believe something was fundamentally wrong with them, broken inside." Saren's stomach hollowed. How long would someone have to be taking this before the effects became permanent? "They wouldn't. That's the insidious part." Heidrek's voice was grim. "The symptoms only persist while the poison is active. Stop the doses, and within weeks, the victim would return to normal. They would never know they had been drugged at all. Unless someone told them. Unless someone told them." Saren thought about Torvald. The shame in his voice when he had spoken about his episodes, the way he had looked at his hands like they belonged to a stranger. "It happens to me sometimes. Ever since I was little, his entire life. Someone had been poisoning him his entire life." She knew who. And then another thought struck her, cold and terrible. Torvald's brother. The Omega child who had died of a fever at 7 years old. The brother his mother had wanted sent away. What if that hadn't been a fever at all? "Can you prove this?" she asked. "I can prove the wine was poisoned, but proving who did it?" Heidrek shook his head. "That would require more than an old alchemist's testimony." "Then I'll find more." She gathered the evidence and left, her mind racing. She needed to tell Torvald. She needed to show him what his mother had done, not just to him, but possibly to his brother. But she had to be careful. Lady Morvena was powerful, connected, and beloved by certain factions of the court. An accusation without proof would destroy Saren and leave Ren vulnerable. She had to be smart about this. She returned to her chambers and hid the goblet in a place no one would think to look. Then she sat on her bed trying to think. A knock at the door made her jump. "Miss Saren?" A servant's voice, muffled through the wood. "Your sister sent for you. She says it's urgent." Saren's heart lurched. "Where is she?" "The East Garden. She was playing there when she—" Saren was already running. The East Garden was empty when she arrived. Snow covered the benches. The fountain was frozen solid. No footprints anywhere. No Ren. "Looking for someone?" She spun. Lady Morvena emerged from the shadow of an archway, wrapped in silver furs, her smile as cold as the ice surrounding them. "Where is my sister?" Serene's voice came out raw. "Safe. For now." Lady Morvena stepped closer. "Though, that depends entirely on what you do next. If you've hurt her? Hurt her? I've done nothing." The older woman's smile widened. "But the castle is full of dangers. Stairs to fall down. Fires to wander too close to. Windows left open in the cold." She tilted her head. "It would be tragic if something happened to her while you were distracted playing advisor to my son. What do you want?" "I want you gone. Tonight. Take your sister and leave Darkholm. Go back to whatever frozen village spawned you and never return." "And if I refuse?" Lady Morvena's mask cracked. Ugliness surfaced beneath. "Then I'll make sure neither of you ever leaves this castle. Not alive, anyway." She stepped closer. "Did you really think you could come here and change anything? You're an Omega, a nobody. My son's little fascination will fade, and when it does, you'll have nothing. No protection, no status, no future. Your son knows what you are. Does he?" Lady Morvena laughed. "He's known me his entire life. He's watched me guide him, shape him, make him into the king he is. Whatever poison you try to drip in his ear, he'll never believe it. Not over his own mother. You've been drugging him, for years." The words hung in the frozen air. Lady Morvena's smile faded. "The moonshade in his wine. The violent episodes he thinks are his nature. You manufactured all of it." Saren's voice grew stronger. "You needed him broken so you could control him. You needed him to believe he was a monster so he'd never question you." Silence stretched between them, and his brother. Saren watched Lady Morvena's face carefully. "The Omega who died of a fever. Was that you too?" A crack appeared in those cold eyes. "He was weak," Lady Morvena said quietly. "Unworthy of the bloodline. His death was a mercy." Saren's chest constricted. She had suspected. But hearing it confirmed. "You murdered your own son." "I protected the throne." Lady Morvena's voice sharpened. "Everything I've done has been for this kingdom, for Torvald's legacy. You can't understand that. You're nobody." She reached into her cloak and withdrew a small glass vial filled with dark liquid. "You're smarter than I gave you credit for." Her voice turned pleasant. "But smart isn't enough." She threw the vial at Serene's feet. It shattered. Smoke billowed up, thick and choking. Saren staggered back, coughing and her vision blurring. The last thing she heard before darkness took her was Lady Morvena's voice. "Sweet dreams, Omega." She woke to agony. Her wrists burned where rough rope cut into her skin. Her head pounded. Her throat felt scraped raw. Cold seeped through her clothes, into her bones, settling deep. She tried to move and found herself bound to a tree, arms twisted behind her. She was in the forest. Dense pines surrounded her, black and skeletal against a gray sky. Snow covered the ground in unmarked white. The cold bit at her exposed skin, needled into every gap in her clothing. She had no idea how far from the castle she was, how long she had been unconscious. "Ah, you're awake." Lady Morvena stood a few feet away, pulling on leather gloves with careful precision. Behind her, 2 guards waited in silence, loyal to her, not to the king. "This is foolish," Saren said, her voice raw. She could feel her body shaking, whether from cold or fear she couldn't tell. "People will look for me. Torvald will believe what I tell him." Lady Morvena smiled. "That you took your sister and fled in the night. That you were never trustworthy. That he was a fool to believe otherwise. He won't believe that. He will when they find your body in the southern pass. A tragic accident. Caught in a storm." She tilted her head. "Or perhaps attacked by rogues. I haven't decided yet." "And Ren?" Lady Morvena's expression flickered. "The child will be useful. Leverage, if needed. Disposed of if not." White-hot rage cut through the cold. Saren pulled at her bonds, felt the rope bite deeper. "You're a monster." "I'm a mother." Lady Morvena's voice went hard. "Everything I've done has been for my son, for his kingdom, for his legacy. He was supposed to be the greatest Alpha King in history, unstoppable, unquestioned. And then, you came along." Her lip curled. "An Omega who made him soft, who made him question everything I built." She drew a blade from her belt, long and thin and gleaming. "I should have done this the day you arrived." Saren closed her eyes. She thought about Ren's laugh, Torvald's rare smile, the feeling of belonging she had finally found. She thought about dying here, in the cold, alone. Then she opened her eyes and screamed, not for help, not for mercy. She screamed a name, "Torvald!" The sound tore through the forest, birds scattered, snow fell from branches. Lady Morvena laughed. "He can't hear you, no one can." But Saren kept screaming, because she had nothing else left. "Torvald! Torvald!" Lady Morvena raised the blade, and the forest exploded. The wolf came through the trees like a shadow given teeth. Massive, black, moving faster than anything that size had a right to move. Lady Morvena spun. The guards drew weapons. Someone shouted. The wolf hit the first guard before his sword cleared the sheath. The second turned to run and made it 3 steps before he was thrown into a tree. Then the wolf turned to Lady Morvena. She stood frozen, blade still raised, her face white with shock. "Torvald!" Her voice shook. "Son." "Listen to me." The wolf snarled, low and dangerous. "I did this for you. Everything I did was for you. You have to understand." The wolf lunged. Lady Morvena's hand moved. The blade flashed, and Torvald, mid-leap, twisted his body to take the strike away from Saren. The blade sank deep into his shoulder. He crashed to the ground with a sound that would haunt Saren forever. The transformation rippled through him, forced by pain, leaving him human and bleeding in the snow. "No!" Saren screamed. She pulled at her bonds. The rope tore her skin. She didn't care. Lady Morvena staggered back, staring at the blade in her hand, at her son lying motionless in the snow. "I didn't—" Her voice cracked. "I didn't mean to—" The forest filled with soldiers. Corvath burst through the trees, a squad of guards behind him. He had been tracking Lady Morvena's movements since dawn, Saren would learn later. The moment she vanished from the castle, he had raised the alarm. His eyes swept the scene. The fallen king, the bloodied blade, Lady Morvena standing over both. "Seize her," he commanded. "No, you don't understand." Lady Morvena backed away. He wasn't supposed to. The guards surrounded her. Her blade clattered to the ground. Corvath was already at Torvald's side, pressing his hands to the wound. "Get the healers, now." Saren couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Torvald's eyes found hers, pale gray, glazed with pain, but focused. Ren, he managed. She's safe. Corvath's voice was tight. We found her locked in the East Tower, frightened but unharmed. The tightness in Saren's chest released. She sagged against the ropes. One of the guards cut her free. She crawled through the snow to Torvald's side, her hands numb, her vision blurring with tears. You came, she whispered. You screamed. His voice was barely audible. I heard you. You were in the castle. You couldn't have... I heard you. His hand found hers, cold and trembling. I will always hear you. The healers arrived. They lifted him onto a stretcher, barking orders, pressing bandages to the wound. Saren followed, refusing to let go of his hand. Behind them, guards dragged Lady Morvena away. You'll regret this, she screamed. All of you! The kingdom needs strength, not sentiment. You're destroying everything I built. Her screams faded into the trees. Saren didn't look back. The next 3 days were the longest of Saren's life. Torvald drifted in and out of consciousness. The blade had been coated with poison, the healers said. Not lethal, but enough to slow his recovery. Saren stayed by his bed. She slept in the chair beside him. She held Ren when the child cried and answered questions from the council and refused to leave even when Corvath gently suggested she rest. On the 3rd day, she woke to find him watching her. You look terrible, he said. She laughed. It came out wet and broken. You took a blade for me. You screamed my name. He shifted, wincing. Seemed rude not to respond. You could have died. I didn't. She stared at him, tears streaming down her face. All the words she had been holding back for months pressed against her chest. I know about the poison, she said quietly. Your mother. The moonshade. Everything. His expression tightened. Corvath told me. Your whole life. She was drugging you. Making you think you were broken. Making you believe you needed her to control you. Yes. And your brother. Saren's voice caught. Torvald, she admitted it. The fever wasn't real. She killed him because he was an Omega, because she thought he was weak. Silence. Long and heavy. When Torvald spoke again, his voice was rough with grief. I always suspected. I never wanted to believe. I'm sorry. Don't be. He reached out and took her hand. You gave me the truth. That's more than anyone else ever has. You're not broken, Torvald. Her voice cracked. You never were. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he cupped her face with his hand. I know, he said, because of you. She closed her eyes. Tears fell against his palm. Stay, he whispered. I'm not going anywhere. No. His thumb brushed her cheek. Stay, not as my advisor, not as my guest. He paused. Stay as my family, you and Ren. Stay here, with me, forever. Saren opened her eyes. He was looking at her the way he had that day on the balcony, the way he looked at something precious, something worth protecting. Are you asking me, she said slowly, to be your Luna? I'm asking you to be mine. His voice was rough. In whatever way you'll have me. She leaned forward and pressed her forehead to his. Yes, she whispered. He kissed her. It was soft at first, tentative, then deeper, more certain. His hand slid into her hair. Her hands found his shoulders. The world outside the room ceased to exist. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, the door burst open. Ren stood in the doorway, Corvath behind her, looking apologetic. I knew it, Ren shrieked triumphantly. I knew you loved each other. Torvald laughed. Saren laughed, and Ren launched herself onto the bed between them, wrapping her arms around both their necks. Does this mean I get to stay? She asked. Forever, Torvald said. Ren beamed. Good. Because I already told everyone you were my family. Saren looked at Torvald over her sister's head. His eyes were warm, real, unguarded. For the first time in years, she felt like she was home. Spring came to Darkholm. The snow melted. Flowers bloomed in the castle gardens. The fortress that had once seemed so cold and forbidding now felt alive with warmth and laughter. Saren stood on the balcony overlooking the courtyard, watching Wren chase butterflies through the grass. The child wore a silver circlet now, a gift from Torvald for her 8th birthday. She called herself Princess Wren and made everyone in the castle address her accordingly. No one seemed to mind. "You're staring again." Torvald appeared beside her, wrapping his arms around her waist from behind. "I'm appreciating." She leaned back against his chest. "There's a difference." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "If you say so." Below, Wren spotted them and waved frantically. "Watch this." She took a deep breath, closed her eyes, and shifted. The transformation was smooth, graceful. A small silver wolf stood where Wren had been, tail wagging proudly. Saren gasped. She did it. Finally. Torvald's voice was warm with pride. "She's been practicing for weeks. Wanted to surprise you." The little wolf yipped happily, then shifted back into human form. Wren pumped her fist in triumph. "Did you see? Did you see?" "We saw," Saren called down. "I'm so proud of you." Wren beamed and went back to chasing butterflies, now occasionally shifting mid-run just because she could. Saren turned in Torvald's arms to face him. He looked different now. Not softer exactly, but lighter. The shadows that had lived behind his eyes for so long had finally begun to fade. Lady Morvena was gone, confined to a tower in the distant reaches of the kingdom where she could harm no one. The court had accepted her crimes with less shock than Saren expected. Many had suspected, it turned out. None had dared to speak. Now they did. About everything. Torvald had opened the council to all ranks, Omegas included. The arena welcomed any citizen who wished to petition the throne. The kingdom was changing, slowly but surely, into something better. "What are you thinking?" Torvald asked. "That I walked into your arena nearly 3 months ago with nothing. No status, no hope. Nothing except my sister on my back and one impossible demand. And now?" She smiled. "Now I have everything." He kissed her, slow and deep, and she felt it in every part of her. The certainty, the belonging, the love. When they broke apart, Wren was standing at the base of the balcony, hands on her hips. "Are you done?" she called impatiently. "Because you promised we could have lunch in the garden and I'm hungry." Torvald laughed. The sound was full and warm and real. "Coming, little wolf." He took Saren's hand, and together they walked down to meet their family. The war inside Torvald was over. The kingdom was at peace. And somewhere in the heart of Darkholm, a girl who had once been nobody discovered that she had become everything.